Here's a match right here that a lot of wrestling fans was dying to see years and years. And Hulk Hogan versus Stone Cold Steve Austin was supposed to happen at WrestleMania 18. But then I guess Austin at the time he was in a very bad place and he felt like I guess he thought the match was gonna suck if he would have went up against Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 18. So then they replaced him with The Rock, and Rock actually won the match, by the way, at WrestleMania 18 against Hollywood Hulk Hogan. Now, for years, a lot of fans out there basically wanted to see a Stone Cold Steve Austin versus Hulk Hogan for a very long time. And basically, WWE pretty much missed out on it. I mean, yeah, they had an opportunity to make it happen. And the best opportunity for them to really make that match happen was WrestleMania 18 when Hulk Hogan still had a little bit of gas in the tank still. I mean, Hogan could still go. He still had a little bit of gas in the tank back then. So I say that was the perfect timing to really, really make that match happen though. You know what I'm saying? Because Hulk Hogan wasn't really like moving around like he used to when he was younger. You know what I'm saying? But WrestleMania 18 was definitely the right time to make it happen though. So this is a big what if though. What if this match would have actually happened though? Now I'll say this: if Hulk Hogan, well, I'm gonna say Hollywood Hulk Hogan, if Hulk Hogan versus Stone Cold Steve Austin, if it did would have happened at WrestleMania 18, most likely Austin would have won that match. He would have won because if they let The Rock beat all, I mean, if they let The Rock beat Hulk Hogan at WrestleMania 18, what makes you think they wasn't going to allow Austin to beat Hulk Hogan? So Austin definitely would have won that match. He would have definitely got a victory over Hulk Hogan. Don't get me wrong. Austin definitely would have won that match. Storyline wise, I don't know how they would have done it. In storyline wise, though, I don't know how the storyline would have turned out to be if these two would have went at it at WrestleMania 18. The build up. Maybe it would have been like Austin would have came out there on Raw and he would have bragged about. Well, actually Hulk Hogan, because Hulk Hogan was a heel when he came back to the WWF. When he came back, he came back as the NWO, and he told the fans that he told the fans to kiss his ass. So I can see Hulk Hogan coming out there, basically kind of cutting the same promo like he did with The Rock. Like Hulk Hogan said, "I'm the reason why wrestling is big as it is today. I'm the ones who put asses in seats. I'm the one that drew a whole lot of money." And that's when you hear Stone Cold comes out and Austin comes out getting Hogan's face and saying, "Hey, I surpass you in every way. I'm just as much as a bigger star than you, Hogan, than you ever was." I believe that's how the storyline would have really played out, in my opinion. But Austin definitely would have beat Hogan at WrestleMania 18, no doubt about it. Because they let Rock won, so yeah, they would have let Austin won. But I was thinking though, they, I mean, they had so many opportunities back in WCW when Stone Cold was in WCW as Stunning Steve Austin. Um, I remember Stone Cold said in one of his interviews that he did want. I think it was an ECW promo, and I remember Austin was saying like he wanted to do something with Hogan. Him and Hogan do a feud in WCW, and I guess WCW felt like Austin wasn't really the right guy. He wasn't markable enough. So if Austin would have went against Hulk Hogan in WCW at Study Steve Austin, we all know Hulk Hogan would have got a victory over Austin because there's no way that we would have let WCW let Austin beat Hulk Hogan. There would have been no way. Um, I'm just trying to thank people like if this match was to happen back in the day when these guys was in their prime. I'm trying to think though which version of Stone Cold Steve Austin that we use. I would use the 1998 and 1999 version of Stone Cold Steve Austin when he was really red hot. I would use that version against the Hulk Hogan version in the 80s. Um, because Hulk Hogan, he's from the golden era. Stone Cold Steve Austin, he's from the Attitude era. Both legendaries. You know what I'm saying? They both are legendaries. Um, I don't know if this match would have happened back in the '80s, because we know the '80s was basically was about kids. You know, it was about family. That's how the program was back in the golden era, back in the '80s when Hulk Hogan was running wild. Now imagine if they would have used the 1998 version of Stone Cold Steve Austin and put him in that timeline in the '80s when Hulk Hogan was really running wild and drawing a whole lot of money for the wrestling company back then. I can actually see Stone Cold Steve Austin being the ultimate heel in the '80s, because I can just see Hulk Hogan going out there signing autographs, because we know in the '80s they would not allow the middle finger, beer drinking, all the swearing. They wouldn't really allow that back in the '80s when Hulk Hogan was running wild. But let's say if they did, let's say if they did allow those to happen back in the '80s. We used the 1998 version of Stone Cold Steve Austin when he was red hot, and put him in the timeline with Hulk Hogan in the '80s. You know, when he was running wild. But as I was saying, I can actually see Stone Cold Steve Austin being the ultimate heel in the '80s. I could just see fans just hating on this guy, because this guy would come out, swear, give the middle finger to the fans out there. You know, the audience would probably flip him off too, probably throw cups and garbage at Austin. They would basically call Austin a hillbilly redneck. Basically, they'll call him a redneck because, if Austin would have came in, with the with the shaved bald head and with the blue, with the blue shorts, and they basically would have called Austin a skinhead, a racist skinhead back in the '80s if this match would have happened with him and Hogan. But I can actually see Stone Cold Steve Austin. He would have definitely been our ultimate heel in the '80s. As I was saying again, I can see Hulk Hogan signing autographs with the kids, and Stone Cold just comes in there and just beat them up, and make all the kids cry and ripping up little kids' signs and all that stuff like that. I mean, Austin would have been the most hated villain in the '80s. I mean, hell, he would have been a bigger heel than Ric Flair. I mean, Ric Flair was a pretty big heel back in the '80s and '90s, but Austin would have been up there. He would have been the ultimate heel. You know what I'm saying? Because I could just see Austin just going out there in the ring, beating Hulk Hogan up, making him bleed, and kids out there in the crowd just crying, and Austin just be like, "Look at your hero right now. This is supposed to be your American hero." Austin just beating Hogan in a bloody mess, in a bloody pulp. You know what I'm saying? I can see Austin. I'm telling you right now, man. The 1998 version of Stone Cold Steve Austin and the golden era in the '80s when Hogan was running wild. I'm telling you, y'all, he would have been the ultimate heel. I'm telling you that right now. Now, as far as him beating Hulk Hogan clean in the '80s, I don't see that. I can see him probably getting himself disqualified, but as far as Austin like beating Hulk Hogan clean in the '80s, no, I don't see that happening. Hogan will most likely, get a victory over him, get redemption, get payback for all his Hulkamaniacs out there that Austin has made, cried, and out there in the crowd, made little kids cry out there. You know what I'm saying? I could definitely see that actually happen. I don't see Austin, getting a clean win on Hulk Hogan in the '80s though. I just see him maybe cheating, just cheating, getting a cheap victory over Hulk Hogan, getting himself disqualified. You know what I'm saying? Austin out there beating Hulk Hogan with a steel chair, and fans out there just booing Austin out the fucking building and shit. I'm talking about in the '80s, people. I'm not talking about in the '90s when Hulk Hogan was getting booed. I'm not talking about that. I'm talking about in the '80s when Hulk Hogan was really running wild and he was really becoming very, very, very popular and everything like that. I'm not talking about the 1992 or 93 or 94 version of Hulk Hogan when he was getting mixed boos with the fans. Because had they used Stone Cold Steve Austin from the Attitude Era and put him in that timeline, he definitely would have got cheered. He definitely would have got cheered. Austin would have got cheered. He would have got loved by the fans. back in the early 90s, 93 or 92, beating the hell out of Hulk Hogan. But as far as the 80s go, I don't see that. I don't see Stone Cold Steve Austin getting cheered. I just see him getting booed a lot and making little kids cry. People would call him a redneck. So Austin would basically be a skinhead type of villain. He'll be a skinhead. I can see Austin having his own skinhead crew in the 80s. Even though it'd have been too much, because even though they would not have allowed that kind of stuff to go down, but I'm just using my imagination on if they did allow that back in the 80s. I can just see Austin having his own skinhead crew and, you know, doing all types of things. I'm not saying they'll let Austin go out there and say the N word and stuff like that. I know they wouldn't let him do that, but he would definitely come out there with some country skinhead music, probably. You know what I'm saying? Some goofy type of. But Austin most likely would have been a skinhead. He would have been a skinhead. He'd be like, oh, this guy's racist. He doesn't like black people. You know, Austin would have been looked at as a redneck in the 80s, though, in my opinion. Like I said, people, I'm just using my imagination and shit like that. You know, if Hulk Hogan and Stone Cold Steve Austin would have happened, if it would have happened in their prime, if they both was in their prime. You know what I'm saying? So yeah, that's all I have to say though. I was just using my imaginations on what they could do on how Austin would have been if he was in the 80s going up against Hulk Hogan when Hulk Hogan was in his prime and at his very peak. You know what I'm saying? That's the Hulk Hogan that I want to see Austin go up again. I don't want to see Austin go up against the older version of Hulk Hogan where he's slowing down and shit. You know, but Austin definitely would have been the most hated heels in the 80s. He definitely would have been the most hated. And he would have been one of the top heels of all times. The ultimate top heels of all times. I'm telling you, nobody wouldn't been able to capitalize the heat that Austin had if he was around the 80s, beating Hulk Hogan up, making little kids cry. Nobody wouldn't have been able to top that off. Austin would have been right up there, one of the top number one best heels of all times. Anyway, that's all I got to say. Peace.